After I lost my job, my wealthy husband looked at me one morning and declared with chilling simplicity, "From now on, we divide everything equally, 50-50. I'll only look after myself." I didn't cry, didn't yell, didn't even blink. I simply met his gaze, steady and calm, and said, "All right." He had no idea what those two words would set in motion. "Sign this," Aiden said later, sliding a stack of papers across the marble dining table with the same confidence he used to close multi-million-dollar hedge fund deals. I had my lawyer prepare it this morning. The title read Domestic Financial Restructuring Agreement. My coffee sat untouched, cooling in my hands as I stared at the pages. I'd been unemployed for only 3 short days, and my husband of 8 years had already turned to legal counsel to divide our life into tidy, itemized columns. He repeated himself, uncapping his Mont Blanc pen, the same one I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. "From now on, we split everything evenly. I'll only care for myself." The morning sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, catching the pen's gold trim, the same light that had once made our Saturday mornings feel almost sacred. For 8 years, those mornings had been our small tradition, me in the kitchen preparing eggs Benedict from scratch, Aiden reading the Financial Times, occasionally sharing merger updates from his world of hedge funds. The hollandaise sauce I'd perfected, the exact temperature of his coffee, the fresh flowers I arranged every weekend, it had all once been love. Now, it just looked like unpaid labor he'd decided to quantify. "You actually had your lawyer draft this?" I asked quietly, flipping through the meticulous clauses and subsections. "Without even discussing it with me?" "I wanted a framework ready," he replied, adjusting his Princeton class ring, an old nervous habit I'd noticed on our first date. "It's more efficient this way." Efficient. Everything in Aiden's life revolved around optimization. It made him exceptional at running hedge funds and absolutely incapable of understanding why I was staring at him as if he'd become a stranger. The document was painfully thorough: rent division, utilities, grocery costs, even a formula for calculating usage of shared spaces. My husband had turned our marriage into a spreadsheet while I was still grieving the loss of my job at Hartman Capital. That Monday had started normally enough. I'd kissed Aiden goodbye, driven to the office, grabbed my usual vanilla latte from the cart outside. By noon, I was sitting across from Sophia in her corner office while she delivered the rehearsed speech about strategic restructuring. We both knew the truth. The new company director wanted his nephew in a senior role, and I was the expendable one, nepotism dressed up as fiscal necessity. Sophia had pushed the severance packet across her desk, avoiding my eyes. "You're brilliant, Ava. This isn't about performance." But performance was everything to Aiden. "When did you decide all this?" I asked him now, setting the contract down before my anger crumpled it into a ball. "It's been on my mind for a while," he said, finally looking up from his phone. "Your job loss just clarified things. My father always said dependency breeds weakness." His father, Robert Mercer, the tech mogul who'd built an empire on the backs of underpaid developers and died at 58 at his desk, leaving Aiden both millions and the inability to separate a person's value from their income. I thought of Tuesday evening, the night I told him I'd been laid off. He was in his home office, surrounded by glowing monitors filled with market charts. I'd stood in the doorway, hesitant, almost like an outsider in my own home. "I lost my job," I'd said. His fingers froze for 2 seconds, then resumed typing. When I mentioned the severance, 2 weeks, he'd finally turned around, expression flat. "Don't worry, we'll figure something out." Yet, even as he spoke, he'd pulled up our joint account to calculate how long my last paycheck would sustain me. He'd poured himself a glass of Macallan 25, worth more than most people's monthly rent, and excused himself for a quick work call that lasted over 2 hours. I sat alone, staring through the floor-to-ceiling windows at Lake Michigan, realizing my unemployment wasn't something he intended to share. It was a problem he planned to manage. Now, just 3 days later, here he was presenting me with a contract that reduced 8 years of marriage to bullet points and balance sheets. "What about Thursday night?" I asked. "When you said we were partners." That dinner had been his idea, a strategy session, he'd called it. I'd worn the black dress he once adored, the one that made me feel powerful even as my career crumbled. He'd ordered Krug champagne without asking my preference, the first time in 8 years he hadn't cared what I wanted. While other couples held hands across candlelit tables, Aiden had launched into a presentation about restructuring our relationship for maximum efficiency, his sanitized term for dismantling everything we'd built together. "We are partners," he said now, tapping the contract. "Equal partners. This ensures that." I studied him, the precision of his hair, the Tom Ford suit even on a Saturday, the faint look of irritation that crossed his face whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. When had he become this person? Or had he always been this way, and I'd simply refused to see it through the haze of affection? "You remember I specialized in forensic accounting at Hartman, right?" I said evenly. Something flickered in his expression, worry, maybe, but it was gone in a heartbeat. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Just recalling my skill set," I said softly, lifting the pen, his pen, my gift to him from another lifetime when gifts still meant something beyond status. Since I was now expected to be self-sufficient, I signed my name with deliberate grace, Ava Mercer, the final time I'd ever use it. Then I slid the document back across the marble surface we'd chosen together in Italy on our honeymoon, when the future had felt limitless and bright. "Equal partners," I said. Aiden smiled, pleased, already turning back to his phone. He didn't notice me photographing each page with my phone. He didn't see me mentally tracing every account, every hidden asset, every discreet transfer I'd once pretended not to know about. He definitely didn't notice me texting my sister Kale. You were right. It was happening. While Aiden believed he was reorganizing our marriage into something sleek and efficient, what he had truly done was declare war and then hand me the full blueprint for victory. Kale's text came almost instantly after I sent her the photos, finally showing his true colors. "Document everything." My sister had never trusted Aiden. Not since the first night she met him at our engagement party, when he publicly corrected her pronunciation of moat, like a smug professor lecturing a student. I tucked my phone away and went to bed, though sleep refused to come. My mind replayed every detail, the signature, the contract, the flat calculation in Aiden's eyes. By 5 o'clock in the morning, I gave up pretending. His side of the bed was already empty, the sheets barely disturbed. Through the closed door of his home office, I could hear his smooth, confident tone, the one reserved for clients, as he discussed profit margins and market volatility with Singapore. Saturday morning, and my husband was already 3 hours into his workday. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, desperate for caffeine to clear my thoughts. Aiden's laptop sat open on the counter, the screen still glowing. He must have been working there before his call. What I did next wasn't something I planned, and though I can't say I was proud of it, I certainly wasn't ashamed either. The spreadsheet on the screen was titled Household Reorganization Postal. My layoff had been reduced to a label, Ava Layoff, like a financial event to be analyzed. Each column was perfectly formatted. Betrayal monthly contributions showed my salary, my share of expenses, and the percentage I'd covered. The Postal sustainability model projected how much of a financial liability I had become. There were projections for 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months, as if I were some investment gone sour. Then I saw the final column, Optimal Resolution Timeline. My stomach tightened. He had calculated how long it would take before he could justify leaving me. I photographed everything, each tab, every number, every cold metric of my supposed worth. Then I noticed another sheet labeled MGM Consulting. My pulse spiked. Monthly transfers of $3,000. Each payment had gone out for the last 6 months to Madison Grace Mitchell, his 28-year-old executive assistant, the one who texted him about urgent presentations close to midnight. Through the closed office door, I could still hear his laugh, that polished, practiced sound he reserved for clients. I shut his laptop gently and got to work. By the time Aiden left for golf at 9 o'clock, his sacred Saturday ritual with Daniel Price and 2 other Princeton friends, I had turned our dining room into a war room. I'd driven to OfficeMax the moment it opened at 8, leaving with armfuls of laminating sheets, binders, color-coded folders, and enough labels to organize a legal archive. Heading to the club, Aiden had said as he grabbed his golf bag. He paused at the door, watching me sort papers across the table. What's all this organization about? Just being self-sufficient, I replied, not looking up. He laughed, genuinely amused, and left. The moment his Tesla disappeared down the ramp, I got serious. 8 years of marriage meant 8 years of tax returns, investment statements, bank ledgers, and expense reports. Aiden liked to think he could hide his assets, but forensic accounting had been my expertise long before Hartman Capital ever laid me off. Finding money was what I did best. So, I created my own masterpiece, a 47-page document titled Marital Asset Utilization Framework. If Aiden wanted to run our marriage like a business, I'd give him the corporate version of it, complete with analysis, citations, and executive summaries. Section 1. Historical Labor Analysis. Every dinner party I had hosted for his clients. Every weekend spent smiling through dull golf tournaments. Every thank you note I had written, every corporate gift I had selected. Every exhausting hour spent making him look like a charming, functional man instead of the emotionally vacant executive he truly was. Section 2. Intellectual Property Contributions. The investment strategies I'd suggested that he'd later presented as his own. The Hartman contacts I'd introduced who became his clients. The market insights I'd shared over breakfast that somehow made their way into his quarterly presentations. Section 3. Opportunity Cost Analysis. The promotions I declined to support his schedule. The professional conferences I missed to entertain his mother. The countless opportunities I'd sacrificed to maintain his illusion of the perfect domestic life. By the time Aiden's Tesla returned at 1 o'clock, I had printed, bound, and placed everything in a leather portfolio that looked expensive enough to command his respect. I heard the familiar sound of his golf shoes on the marble floor, the refrigerator door opening. "Ava," he called. "Why is there a lock on your shelf?" I didn't answer. Let him wonder. He found me in the dining room, still seated at the table, the portfolio placed neatly in front of me. His face was sun-flushed, his plaid golf pants absurd. "What is all this?" he asked, motioning to my neatly organized setup. "Your copy," I said evenly, sliding the binder across the table with the same controlled precision he'd used that morning when presenting his contract. He smirked, the same smug half-grin I'd once mistaken for charm. "Ava, come on." Page 12, I interrupted. "Start with section 3.2. Still smiling, he opened it. I watched his expression shift as he read the heading, Retroactive Compensation for Unrecognized Labor Contributions, 2016 to 2024. "This is thorough," I supplied calmly. "Keep reading." His smile vanished completely when he reached the total, $347,000, the market rate value of my unpaid labor as an executive assistant, event planner, financial consultant, and social coordinator. "You can't be serious," he muttered. Page 36, I said. Precedent cases for retroactive compensation in dissolved business partnerships. His phone rang. Daniel Price. Aiden's hand trembled slightly as he answered. "Mark, I need your opinion on something." "Legal matter." "Can I put you on speaker?" "Sure, buddy," Daniel said, still jovial. "What's up?" "Ava drafted a document about our household arrangement," Aiden said. "Send it over," Daniel replied, his tone turning professional. I watched Aiden photograph each page, his jaw tightening with every shot. Silence filled the room except for the ticking of the grandfather clock, his mother's wedding gift. After several minutes, Daniel spoke again, this time without humor. "Aiden, is this real?" "She signed my agreement this morning, then created this," Aiden answered stiffly. "No, I mean, are the figures real? Did she actually handle all this?" Aiden didn't respond. His silence was enough. Daniel whistled low. "Legally, you're cornered, man. You wanted a business arrangement, she gave you one. And honestly, she's lowballing herself. She's worth more." "You're supposed to be my friend," Aiden snapped. "I am your friend," Daniel said flatly. "Which is why I'm telling you, either tear up both agreements and fix your marriage, or prepare to write a very large check." Aiden hung up without replying. We stood there across the same marble table where we'd once planned our future, where this morning he dismantled our marriage with a pen stroke. "This is blackmail," he said finally, voice tight. "This is mathematics," I replied, echoing his words from earlier. "Your idea, just properly executed." Aiden stood motionless, his hand gripping the portfolio so hard the leather creaked. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving my document behind like evidence at a crime scene. I heard the slam of his office door and the sharp click of the lock. That night, I barely slept. Not because of guilt. I was long past guilt. What kept me awake that night was strategy. Aiden prided himself on being the master tactician, the man who always thought 3 moves ahead. What he didn't realize was that I'd spent 8 years studying his every habit, his every tell, learning the rhythm of his arrogance and the pattern of his mistakes. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I slipped quietly into the living room, laptop in hand. Our smart home system had been Aiden's pride and joy, a $50,000 monument to automation. The future of living, he'd called it, spending weeks programming zones, sensors, and voice commands. Now, that system would become my battlefield. The master control app was still linked to my phone. Aiden had never imagined he'd need to revoke my administrator access. Why would he? I'd always let him play the expert with his gadgets. It took me nearly 3 hours, several online tutorials, and a pot of strong coffee, but by dawn, I had restructured everything. 2 zones now existed: Ava Zone and Aiden Zone. My section ran under new passwords, with biometric locks that recognized only my fingerprints and facial ID. His section still operated under the old system, but I'd inserted a few creative limitations. The real art, though, was in the overlap zones, the spaces we were supposed to share equally. Those areas now required both of our authorizations to function. When Aiden's alarm rang at 6 in the morning, I was already back in bed, feigning sleep. I heard the shuffle of his feet, the creak of the bathroom door, and then silence, followed by a low curse. The shower hadn't turned on. "Ava," he called. "Something's wrong with the shower." I stretched and yawned. "Mine works fine," I said lazily. "Try resetting your access code." There was more cursing, followed by the sound of buttons being jabbed. Eventually, water began to flow, but only cold. I'd restricted his hot water access to energy-saving mode between 6 and 7. Efficiency was key, after all. By the time he trudged into the kitchen, still damp and irritated, I was already sipping my coffee and scrolling the news. "The coffee machine won't connect," he said, glaring at the stainless steel appliance as though it had betrayed him. "That's in my zone now," I replied. "Would you like to purchase a cup? I'm offering a premium rate, $8. His face turned crimson. "This is ridiculous." "This," I said with satisfaction, "is the 50-50 arrangement you wanted. Equal access to assets." I took a slow sip. "Your coffee maker is in your office." He stormed off, and soon I heard the gurgle of the cheap $20 Mr. Coffee machine I'd bought him months ago. It seemed perfectly fitting. Saturday arrived with Kale's visit. My sister drove down from Milwaukee in her 10-year-old Honda and parked next to Aiden's Tesla. The contrast said everything. "Holy," she stopped mid-word as she entered the penthouse. The living room was split in half. My side glowed with warm amber light. His side flickered in cold, sterile blue. A precise digital border divided the apartment into 2 realities. "Ava, what have you done?" she asked. "Implemented Aiden's vision," I said, hugging her. "Come see my side." She followed me through the apartment, her teacher's salary sensibilities visibly appalled by every square foot of extravagance. When we reached the kitchen, she froze. The refrigerator had digital locks separating our food sections. "You're joking." "He ate my meal prep Wednesday night. $60 worth of organic ingredients gone," I said, showing her footage on my phone. Aiden in his boxers, illuminated by refrigerator light, devouring my neatly labeled containers. "This isn't healthy," she whispered. I showed her my bank statements, the joint account he'd quietly drained, my severance payments diverted into household expenses, and the credit card he'd canceled without warning. "Oh, honey," she said softly, realization dawning. "He's trying to force you out." "No," I corrected. "He's trying to break me." But he forgot I learned from the best. Sunday morning brought my next move. Aiden proudly announced he was going grocery shopping, a first in our 8-year marriage. I waited 10 minutes, then followed. Whole Foods was crowded, the perfect place for discreet observation. I stayed at a distance, camera quietly recording as Aiden wandered through produce like a lost executive on an alien planet. He stared at a small box of cherries for 5 full minutes, incredulous at the $27 price tag. "Excuse me," he asked a teenage clerk, "is this the normal price for cherries?" The boy glanced up. "It's organic, sir. Imported. But $27? You could try the regular ones," the clerk suggested. "They're 8. Aiden, of course, took the expensive box. Image over economics. The meat counter was worse. He ordered 8 pounds of Wagyu beef, misunderstanding that the price, $120, was per pound. The butcher raised an eyebrow but wrapped it anyway. Aiden added truffle salt for 45, aged balsamic for 62, and heritage grains for 30, an item I was sure he couldn't even define. His total came to $438.67 for 1 week of groceries for one man. I was already home when he returned, arms full of overpriced bags. "Need help?" I asked sweetly. "I've got it," he grunted, lugging the goods to his section of the kitchen. By Monday morning, poetic justice had arrived. Aiden had an 8 o'clock breakfast meeting with Japanese investors, crucial for his fund's expansion. He woke at 6, showered, still cold, and went to make breakfast. Through my laptop's live feed, I watched him open his refrigerator. The Wagyu sat untouched, the truffle salt gleamed, and the heritage grains looked decorative. He tried every password combination imaginable for access to my section. Ava1234, Anniversary 2016, even I love you, which almost made me laugh out loud. At 7:47, he finally caved and ordered delivery, $85 for eggs, toast, and coffee, arriving at 8:23. His investors had already waited 23 minutes. That evening, I found him at the counter, eating cereal for dinner. The Wagyu had spoiled. "For $100 in groceries," I said softly, "and you're eating cornflakes?" He looked up at me, something cracking, just slightly, in his polished facade. Not enough to matter, but enough to tell me the war was working. He pushed his bowl away, the cornflakes soggy in milk, and left without a word. His office door slammed shut moments later. I cleaned the bowl anyway, old habits die hard. That's when I noticed his credit card statement, half hidden under the Wall Street Journal. One line item caught my eye, MGM Consulting, $3,000. It appeared every month for the past 6 months, while he lectured me about tightening our belts. I photographed it and opened my laptop. The address for MGM Consulting wasn't a corporate office. It wasn't even a business complex. It was the Meridian, an upscale high-rise downtown where even the smallest studios started at $4,000 a month. My instincts, honed by years of forensic accounting, immediately went into overdrive. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about uncovering the truth. I began digging. Corporate records, registration filings, tax IDs, every thread I could pull. MGM Consulting LLC had been registered 7 months earlier. The managing member, Madison Grace Mitchell. 28 years old, Harvard MBA, long legs, and a reputation for sending urgent texts to Aiden well past midnight. Their so-called consulting firm had a website if 3 shallow blog posts about manifesting professional alignment counted as one. The last update was 4 months old. It was all a facade. The late nights. The weekend emergencies. The sudden obsession with keeping his phone face down during dinner, taking it into the bathroom while showering, it all began to click. I was cataloging these discoveries into a new spreadsheet labeled Suspicious Financial Activity when fate handed me an unexpected gift. Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m. The sound of running water came from the bathroom, Aiden in the shower, steam fogging the glass. He'd learned to bypass my hot water restriction by showering late. His phone lay charging on the nightstand, screen lighting up with a notification. I shouldn't have looked. But then again, he shouldn't have been financing his assistant's luxury apartment while making me itemize grocery receipts. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby." Madison Mitchell. The water kept running. I grabbed my own phone, snapped a photo of his screen with the timestamp visible, and added it to my growing digital dossier filed neatly under Exhibit A, Emotional Assets Misappropriation. When he emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in the Turkish cotton robe I'd gifted him last Christmas, I didn't miss a beat. "Who texted?" I asked, my tone light casual. He glanced at the phone, and in that split second, I saw panic flicker before he masked it with his usual calm. "Work thing. Singapore markets. At midnight? Sending heart emojis?" I murmured, turning a page on my Kindle I hadn't actually read. "Busy day tomorrow," he said quickly. "Just meetings." He climbed into bed, careful not to cross the invisible line that now separated his half from mine. "Why?" he asked finally. "Just wondering," I said. Minutes later, he was asleep, snoring softly. I lay in the dark, wide awake, planning. Madison wanted to see him tomorrow? Perfect. Maybe I'd do some seeing of my own. At dawn, Aiden left early, muttering about a client breakfast. I waited until his Tesla disappeared into traffic before calling Melissa, a friend from Hartman who now worked in Aiden's building. "I need a favor," I said. "A visitor pass." "Ava, what are you planning?" "Research," I answered. She sighed. "Cafe on the second floor. 20 minutes. The lobby gleamed, glass, marble, desperation disguised as wealth. Melissa met me at the cafe, sliding her pass across the table. 15th floors is firm, she said quietly. "But you didn't get this from me." "Get what?" I smiled, pocketing the pass. Instead of heading up, I went down to the parking garage. Aiden's Tesla sat in its reserved space, P47, right beside a white BMW with vanity plates reading 28 Madison 28. Subtle. At 12:15, they appeared, Aiden and Madison, stepping out of the elevator together. His hand rested on her lower back, guiding her toward her car, that easy, practiced intimacy of two people long past pretense. She laughed at something, her head tilted back, his expression more alive than I'd seen in months. I took photos. Then I followed. Their destination, Brever, a restaurant so exclusive it didn't bother with signage. The kind of place Aiden reserved for clients he needed to impress. Apparently, it now doubled as a venue for business meetings with his assistant. I was reviewing the photos in my car when someone tapped on my window. My heart lurched. I turned and froze. Grace Mercer stood there in her signature St. John suit and pearls, the embodiment of inherited money and quiet judgment. My mother-in-law. The woman who'd spent 8 years pretending I wasn't quite enough for her son. I lowered the window. "Grace." Following my son, she asked mildly. Not accusation, curiosity. "I can explain." "No need." She opened the passenger door and slipped in, bringing with her the unmistakable scent of Chanel No. 5. "I was here for the Library Foundation lunch." Imagine my surprise seeing Aiden dining with his assistant. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I know about Madison, dear. Have for months." My stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because Aiden's father had his own Madison once," she said evenly. Her name was Olivia. 26. Marketing coordinator. Thought she was in love. Her smile was cold and surgical. "I handled it differently than you are." "What did you do?" I stayed quiet. Played the perfect wife. Let him have his fun. Then Olivia got pregnant. Robert paid her off, but the damage was done. The board found out. His reputation never recovered. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be." I got everything in the end, houses, investments, company shares. She studied me with a new kind of respect. "But your way, this documentation, the contracts, the digital warfare Kale mentioned, might be far more effective." "Kale talked to you?" "She called yesterday," Grace said with a faint smile. "Worried about you." I told her not to be. For the first time since I'd known her, that smile reached her eyes. She opened her purse and took out a small flash drive. "What's this?" "Security footage from the Mercer building. 6 months worth." Amazing how often Madison had to work late. And how often Aiden had to supervise. She pressed it into my hand. "Call it a wedding gift," 8 years late. I stared at the flash drive. This tiny piece of plastic felt heavier than my wedding ring ever had. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. Grace checked her Cartier watch. "Because my son is repeating his father's mistakes, only with less charm and even less discretion." At least Robert had the good taste to be subtle. She opened the car door, then paused. "I'm coming for tea tomorrow. Earl Grey, please." And just like that, she left me sitting in stunned silence, holding evidence I hadn't even asked for, offered by the woman who'd spent nearly a decade treating me like an outsider. The next day, precisely at 2 o'clock, Grace arrived in another immaculate St. John suit, her expression as perfectly composed as ever. Aiden was, as usual, at the office or wherever he truly spent his afternoons. "Earl Grey?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Of course," I said, retrieving my laminated price list, the one born from Aiden's precious 50/50 declaration. "That'll be $12. Includes preparation, service, and cleanup." Her perfectly arched brows lifted. Then, without a word, she reached into her Hermes wallet, not the everyday one, but the special occasion piece, and counted out exactly 12 singles, one by one. Her manicured fingers trembled, not with anger, as I had expected, but with what looked like restrained amusement. $12, she said, setting the bills neatly on the coffee table. "For tea." "Aiden's policy," I replied evenly. "I'm just following the rules he established." "Indeed." Her tone was crisp, her gaze unwavering, the kind of look that could chill champagne. "Make the tea, dear. We need to talk." When I returned with the Earl Grey, properly steeped, poured into fine china, every step performed exactly as Grace had once taught me, she had already arranged a stack of papers across my coffee table. Old documents, yellowed at the edges, some handwritten in careful fountain pen script. 1987, she began, lifting one page delicately. "That's when Robert decided to restructure our marriage. Claimed I'd become too dependent, too comfortable." Sound familiar? I sank onto the couch, careful not to disturb the papers. The top sheet was an old credit card statement showing charges to hotels, restaurants, and jewelry stores, none of them linked to Grace. Olivia, she continued, was 26. Marketing coordinator at his firm. Blonde, ambitious, convinced she was special. She took a slow sip of her $12 tea. "They always think they're special." "How did you find out?" I asked. "Credit card statements first," she said. "Then a private investigator." This was before cell phones, dear, following people required actual skill. From a manila folder, she pulled a stack of grainy photographs and typed reports. "Cost me $5,000. Worth every penny." The images showed Robert Mercer, looking exactly like an older version of Aiden, with a young woman who could have been Madison's twin a decade early. "What did you do?" "Nothing at first. I let him think he was clever. Let him make mistakes. And he did so many." Her smile was razor-sharp. "Then I started moving money." "Moving money?" "Robert thought he controlled our finances," she said, almost amused. "He was the businessman, after all. But I'd managed my father's estate since I was 21. I knew more about offshore accounts and asset protection than he ever did." She pulled out another document, one with dense legal text and typed annotations. "By the time he asked for a divorce, I'd already transferred 70% of our liquid assets into trusts he didn't know existed." "That's brilliant," I said. "Vindictive," she corrected. Then, after a pause, necessary. She shrugged. "It was survival. But you're doing something different, something smarter." From her briefcase, she withdrew a thick packet marked with colored tabs. "This is Robert's original prenuptial agreement, the one Aiden modified for your marriage." I skimmed through the familiar wording until she tapped a section near the bottom. "Section 17B," she said. "Robert insisted on this clause, financial deception affecting marital assets. He believed it would protect him if I ever hid money." Her laugh was bitter. "It became his undoing. Olivia got pregnant. Robert paid her to disappear. That payment counted as financial deception affecting marital assets." The clause triggered itself. I blinked. "And Aiden kept it?" "Modified it," she said. "Expanded it. Made it even stricter." She turned to the tabbed page and read aloud. Any undisclosed financial transaction exceeding $5,000 that impacts marital assets or stability results in immediate forfeiture of claims. $30,000 to Madison over 6 months, I murmured, realizing the magnitude. All documented, Grace said. She gathered a few specific pages and placed them neatly in front of me. This is your ammunition. Use it wisely. The originals are in my safe deposit box, should you ever need them in court. I stared at her. Why are you really helping me? She paused at the doorway, her expression softening just slightly. Because I spent 30 years pretending my marriage was perfect while Robert humiliated me with women half my age. You're not pretending, Ava, you're fighting. She smiled then, that sharp, cold smile I'd come to associate with her power. And frankly, it's about time someone in this family fought back properly. After she left, her words echoed in my mind, check everywhere. I went straight to Aiden's home gym, his sanctuary, where he claimed to clear his head while actually taking conference calls. His gym bag sat in the corner, the expensive leather one I'd given him last year. I opened it methodically, protein powder, earbuds, spare clothes, and tucked in a hidden pocket, a small digital recorder. My pulse quickened as I pressed play. Aiden's voice came through clearly, confident, calculated. She's been unstable since the layoff. Crying all the time, not sleeping, making accusations about affairs. Then Madison's voice, we need to be careful. If she finds out about the payments. She won't, Aiden interrupted. She's too emotional to think clearly. Classic depression. My lawyer says if we document instability, the prenup won't hold. How long before you can file? A few more weeks. Let her keep playing with her spreadsheets and locks. The more erratic she seems, the better for us. Madison laughed softly. Poor thing. She really has no idea. None, Aiden agreed. By the time she figures it out, everything will be in place. Clean break. Minimal settlement. And we can finally stop hiding. The recording continued for another 40 minutes, layer after layer of deceit, proof of their collaboration to dismantle my life piece by piece. I sat on the bench, the recorder heavy in my palm, and felt something inside me shift. Not break, harden. Like coal compressing into diamond. I copied the audio to 3 separate drives, uploaded it to the cloud, and emailed it to my lawyer, Olivia Wu, the one I'd retained the day before, known for her ability to obliterate prenuptial agreements. Then I carefully returned the recorder to its hiding place, positioning everything exactly as I'd found it. Let Aiden think I was still lost in my spreadsheets, oblivious while he plotted my downfall. That evening, I sat in my car outside a Starbucks, neutral ground, free Wi-Fi, no surveillance from his network, and called Olivia. I need to meet tomorrow, I said. Of course, she replied smoothly. Do you also need a forensic accountant? Yes, I said without hesitation. I work with someone, Olivia said. Co Martinez. She's exceptional, but expensive. How expensive? $5,000 retainer each. $10,000. My entire severance, minus groceries and gas. Aiden thought I was using that money for therapy, the therapy he'd oh so helpfully suggested. You seem stressed, Ava. Maybe you should talk to someone about your adjustment issues. Book them both, I said. Tomorrow, if possible. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Brennan and Associates, a corner suite that radiated quiet power, the kind built on old money and older secrets. Sarah Brennan met me in the marble-lined lobby, 60-something, silver haircut into a flawless power bob, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Olivia tells me you have an interesting case, she said, her tone dry but intrigued, and led me toward a glass-walled conference room. Inside waited Olivia Wu, calm and composed as always, and another woman, sharp-eyed, efficient, already typing on a slim laptop. David Martinez, the forensic accountant Olivia had recommended. I spread everything across the polished table. The contracts, the flash drive Grace had given me, the audio recordings, the financial documents, my own detailed spreadsheets chronicling 8 years of unpaid labor and marital maintenance. Sarah gave a low whistle. He actually signed this 50-50 agreement? His idea, I said. Had his lawyer draft it. Olivia raised an eyebrow. And these recordings? Found them yesterday, I said evenly. He's planning to claim I'm mentally unstable. David was already deep in the files, her fingers moving at lightning speed over a calculator. These MGM consulting payments, she murmured. They're just the surface. Look here. She pointed to a cluster of suspicious transfers. He's been moving money for 2 years, Cayman accounts, Swiss numbered accounts. Not criminal, but very much against full financial disclosure. Can you trace it? I asked. Give me a week, she said. Maybe less. Olivia turned her laptop toward me, the Mercer Capital website glowing on the screen. Aiden's firm, she said. And here, Madison Mitchell. Listed as Executive Strategic Consultant. Interesting title for someone whose resume includes 3 blog posts about manifestation. Sarah leaned back, a slow, predatory smile curving her lips. The prenuptial agreement has a financial deception clause, Section 17B. Any undisclosed transaction over $5,000 that affects marital stability triggers immediate forfeiture. $30,000 to Madison, minimum, I said. Plus whatever David uncovers offshore. Sarah's smile widened. Your husband just handed us the perfect weapon. We spent 3 hours constructing the strategy. David would trace every hidden penny, Olivia would build the timeline of deceit, and Sarah would craft the filing that would dismantle Aiden's exit plan piece by piece. When we finally paused, Sarah rested her hands on the table. One more thing, Ava, she said. From now on, document everything. Every word, every transaction, every breath he takes. And be careful, cornered animals get dangerous. By Saturday morning, Aiden announced he was heading to Boston for a conference. I'd already seen the hotel reservation in his email, 2 rooms at the Ritz-Carlton. Apparently, MGM Consulting required extensive weekend strategy sessions. An hour after his Tesla disappeared, my doorbell rang. Madison Mitchell stood in my hallway, 5'9", wearing designer jeans, a silk blouse, and an expression of unearned confidence. I need to pick up some work files from Aiden's office, she said, already trying to step inside. He's in Boston, I replied, blocking the doorway. I know, she said briskly. He gave me permission to. No. She blinked, visibly thrown. Excuse me? No, you can't come in. If Aiden wants to give you files, he can do it himself. At the office. During business hours. Her glossy smile faltered. You don't understand, these are important documents for Monday's meeting. Then Aiden should have remembered them, I said, beginning to close the door. She pushed her hand against it, forcing it open again. Look, I don't think you understand the situation here. I took out my phone and began recording. Then explain it to me. Maybe it was my calm tone, or maybe she was just that arrogant, but Madison leaned closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Aiden promised me this place would be mine soon. So maybe you should start packing. Save yourself the embarrassment later. How soon? I asked quietly. A few weeks, maybe less. Depends how quickly his lawyer can prove you're unfit. Her smile was all teeth, no warmth. The crying, the paranoia, the locks and contracts, it's all documented. Classic case of emotional instability after job loss. Is that what Aiden told you? It's what everyone can see, she said smugly, stepping back toward the elevator. I'll tell Aiden you were uncooperative again. I waited until the doors began to close. Madison. She turned, one eyebrow raised. Check your email. As the elevator descended, I hit send. Sarah's cease and desist letter went straight to Madison's inbox, a formal notice demanding she stop harassment, unauthorized entry attempts, and interference in my marriage. CC'd to Aiden's firm's HR department and their legal counsel. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Aiden, Boston. What did you just do? I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded David's preliminary report to Olivia. Aiden had been billing Mercer Capital for Madison's consulting fees, fake invoices, fabricated projects, no verifiable deliverables. Not enough for criminal charges, but more than enough to trigger an internal audit. By Sunday evening, while Aiden was still in Boston, I compiled everything into a single encrypted folder, 2 years of hidden transfers, the recordings of him plotting my supposed mental breakdown, Madison's recorded threats, Grace's flash drive proving the family pattern, a father and son repeating the same deception 3 decades apart. David had uncovered one last revelation that chilled even me. 6 months earlier, Aiden had taken out a $2 million life insurance policy in my name. I was unemployed, unstable, and now worth more dead than divorced. That night, Sarah called. "We file tomorrow morning," she said. "Be ready." I sat in my divided living room, my golden light glowing against the icy blue hue of his half, and thought about the woman I'd been 8 years ago. The one who'd signed a prenuptial agreement, believing love made it irrelevant. The one who'd brewed his coffee every morning because she thought nurturing him was love. That woman no longer existed. In her place sat someone sharper, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Someone who had learned that if your husband treats marriage like a hostile takeover, you fight like a corporate raider. At 3 in the morning, my phone vibrated with a message from Sarah. Filed. Game on. I didn't sleep. I watched the sunrise cast molten gold across Lake Michigan and reviewed my notes for that evening. The quarterly partners' dinner at Mercer Capital, the one event where spouses weren't just invited, but expected. Aiden had forgotten to remove me from the guest list. By the time he stumbled into the kitchen at 7, I was already dressed. Not for battle, but for victory. The black Valentino dress I'd bought after my last promotion at Hartman, the same one Aiden had once said made me too powerful for social events. "The coffee machine isn't working again," he muttered, stabbing at the controls. "Try reading the manual," I said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "I hear self-sufficiency builds character." He scowled, then froze, noticing my reflection. "Where are you going? Work meeting?" "Something like that," I said smoothly, smiling faintly at his confusion. "Potential consulting opportunity," I said, brushing a final layer of lipstick across my lips. Aiden grunted, still fighting with the coffee maker. That's when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I offered, but he was already striding to the door, no doubt expecting Madison with some urgent weekend files. Instead, a man in a dark suit stood there, holding a thick envelope with the indifference of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Aiden Mercer?" "Yes. You've been served." The process server turned and left without another word. Aiden tore open the envelope right there in the doorway, his robe hanging loosely, his face cycling from confusion to disbelief to rage. "You're divorcing me," he demanded, holding the papers like evidence of treason. "You wanted a business dissolution," I said, adjusting an earring. "I'm giving you one." He flipped through the pages, growing paler by the second. $347,000? You're insane. "That's just retroactive compensation," I said coolly. "Wait until you see the penalties for financial deception. Page 47, if you're curious." His hands shook as he turned the pages, finding the section detailing the MGM consulting payments, the offshore accounts, the life insurance policy he'd taken out on me. "How did you?" "Forensic accounting was my specialty," I reminded him. "Or did you forget everything about my career the moment I lost my job?" His phone began to vibrate, first a ring, then a buzz, then a chorus of notifications. Word was already spreading. That evening, I arrived at the Palmer House's grand ballroom 20 minutes after cocktails began. The Mercer Capital quarterly dinner was in full swing, 50 partners and their spouses pretending to enjoy one another's company while mentally calculating their net worths. I spotted Daniel Mercer, the managing partner and Aiden's cousin, near the bar. He'd inherited his father's position and his grandfather's nose for scandal. "Ava," he said, surprised. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied smoothly, pulling an envelope from my clutch. "Actually, Daniel, could we speak privately? It's about Aiden." His wife, sensing the gravity, drifted away. Daniel led me to a quiet corner, already looking tired. "This is about the divorce papers," he guessed. "This is about embezzlement," I corrected, handing him the envelope. "MGM Consulting. $3,000 a month for 6 months, fake invoices, no services rendered." The consultant in question is better known for other services she provides to Aiden. Daniel's face hardened as he skimmed KO's forensic report, the falsified invoices, the non-existent consulting projects. "This could destroy the firm's reputation," he said quietly. Only if it becomes public, I replied. Which depends entirely on how the partners handle it. Across the room, Aiden had just entered, Madison on his arm. A bold, reckless move, flaunting his mistress at a partner's dinner while still legally married. Whispers spread fast, like fire through dry brush. Daniel looked from me to the papers, then to Aiden. What are you asking for? Nothing from the firm, I said. This is between you and your partner. I just thought you deserved to know where company funds have been going. I left him holding the evidence, the spark that would ignite an emergency partners meeting before morning. But I still had one last performance to give. Aiden found me at the dessert table, face flushed with alcohol and fury. Madison hovered behind him, suddenly far less confident, surrounded by wives who saw her for exactly what she was. You're destroying everything, he hissed. I'm documenting everything, I said evenly, loud enough for nearby partners to hear. There's a difference. This is my father's firm. Grace's voice sliced through the ballroom like a blade. It was your father's firm, she said, standing in the doorway in a flawless Chanel suit, a man in a legal-grade pinstripe standing beside her. Before you dishonored his memory with your sloppy affair and even sloppier embezzlement. The room fell silent. Madison instinctively stepped behind Aiden, trying to hide from Grace's icy glare. Mother, he began. I'm here as trustee of the Mercer Family Trust, she said. Effective immediately, you are removed from the board for conduct unbecoming a Mercer. You can't. I can. I am. I have. She turned to Daniel. I believe you have an announcement as well? Daniel cleared his throat. The partners will meet tomorrow to discuss Aiden's position. Until then, he is suspended pending investigation of financial irregularities. Aiden's phone exploded with alerts, emails, messages, notifications from clients and colleagues already distancing themselves. His empire was collapsing in real time. Grace's gaze didn't waver. Your father would be appalled, she said. Not by the affair, he had plenty of those, but by how poorly you executed it. Fake invoices? Really? At least your father's mistresses could type. Madison fled, heels clicking frantically on marble, leaving Aiden standing alone amid the ashes of his own arrogance. I picked up my clutch and walked past him, pausing just long enough to whisper, check your email. The message from Sarah was already waiting for him, settlement conference scheduled for Thursday. Bring your checkbook. As I rode down in the elevator, a new email arrived, Daniel's memo to all partners. Emergency meeting. Mandatory attendance. 8 a.m. By the time I stepped into the cool Chicago night, Aiden's career was over. 8 years of marriage dismantled by his own greed, a lifetime of reputation undone by his deceit. The elevator doors had closed on my old life. I walked out into the city lights feeling something I hadn't felt in months, freedom. Messages poured in sympathy, shock, admiration, but I ignored them all. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. Tonight, I just wanted to breathe. Thursday's settlement meeting took place in a beige mediation office designed to crush emotion. Flickering fluorescent lights. Uncomfortable chairs. The smell of stale coffee. Aiden sat across from me, gaunt, exhausted, with a public defender-grade lawyer who looked as defeated as his client. My client is prepared to offer, the lawyer began. My client's terms are non-negotiable, Sarah interrupted, sliding our demand sheet across the table. The penthouse, half of all assets, including offshore accounts, and $347,000 in retroactive compensation. Aiden's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, likely explaining that a public trial would expose everything, the embezzlement, the affair, the insurance policy. This is extortion, Aiden spat. This is mathematics, I said quietly, using his favorite phrase one last time. Sign it, or we go to trial. He stared at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married, the confident, brilliant strategist who'd believed the world would always bend his way. Then that man vanished. His hand trembled as he picked up the pen. His signature was shaky, nothing like the bold, practiced flourish from our marriage license. As he signed away the penthouse, the accounts, and the remnants of his empire built on deceit and my invisible labor, I felt nothing. No victory. No sorrow. Just the quiet realization that 8 years of my life had ended exactly as they'd begun on paper. 3 months later, I was surrounded by boxes and silence. I kept the penthouse, but it looked nothing like the one Aiden had designed. The sleek glass edges, the cold marble surfaces, the minimalist emptiness gone. Kale helped me rebuild it piece by piece, her hands bringing warmth back into the space. We replaced sterile furniture with second-hand finds that had history, life, and color. Plants filled the corners where Aiden's art once stood, and local paintings replaced the soulless investment pieces he'd bragged about. The air felt alive again. One morning, I sipped coffee from a mug Kale had gifted me, a white ceramic one that read "World's okay ex-wife," when her text came through. A screenshot. Madison's Instagram post. Dating in Chicago is impossible. This guy actually invoiced me for half our dinner date. He calculated tax, tipped down to the penny, and charged me for gas to pick me up. Why are men so cheap? Hashtag dating nightmare, hashtag Chicago men, hashtag splitting bills is not romantic. I laughed until I nearly spilled my coffee. Then I saved it in my karma folder. Madison had finally found her equal, someone who viewed relationships with the same cold precision she once admired in Aiden. The irony was delicious. That screenshot sparked an idea. I had enough settlement money to live comfortably for a while, but comfort wasn't the goal. I wanted purpose. Something meaningful. Something mine. 6 weeks later, Equal means everything went live, not a law firm, but a consulting service designed to help women identify and document financial abuse in their marriages. By Thursday of that same week, I already had 17 inquiries. The first major client came through Grace, of all people. Senator Abigail Thompson, a woman with poise, power, and no personal autonomy. Her husband controlled every dollar she earned, every account she touched. She sat in what used to be Aiden's home gym, now my office, tears smudging her perfectly applied makeup. He says it's for tax purposes, she explained quietly. But I can't even buy groceries without his approval. Let me show you something, I said, pulling up one of my old files. This was my marriage. This is how I proved it. And this is how you'll prove yours. Abigail became my first success story. Within 4 months, she had her own accounts, her own credit cards, and a post-nuptial agreement so airtight it made Aiden's prenup look like a child's draft. Word spread quickly through Grace's country club circle, faster than gossip at a charity luncheon. 6 months after the divorce, Grace invited me to her annual gala, the Mercer Foundation fundraiser for women's financial literacy. The irony was exquisite. I wore red that night. Bold, unapologetic, victorious red. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and whispers. People who'd once watched my life unravel now watched me walk in alone. Ava, Grace called out warmly, genuine warmth, not the polite imitation she'd perfected years ago. Come, I want you to meet someone. She introduced me to 3 women, each trapped in the same gilded cage I had escaped. By the time dinner was served, I'd gained 5 new clients. That's when I saw him. Aiden stood near the bar, a ghost of the man he used to be. His suit was worn, his face drawn, his confidence stripped bare. He worked now at Morrison & Associates, a modest firm handling small-time personal injury claims. Madison was nowhere in sight. He approached slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. Ava, you look, he faltered, searching for words. Happy. I'm glad. He stared down at his drink, the ice melting slowly. I understand now. What I did. How I treated you. I understand. I could have mocked him. I could have twisted the knife. Instead, I said quietly, understanding and experiencing are different educations. He nodded, eyes full of something like regret, and began to walk away. Then he turned back. The firm you started, Equal, means everything. It's good work. Yes, I said simply. It is. Grace appeared beside me as he faded into the crowd. They're about to announce the Community Impact Award, she said, guiding me toward the stage. The Mercer Foundation is proud to present this year's Community Impact Award to Ava Matthews, the announcer declared, using my maiden name, the one I'd reclaimed. The award recognized my work helping women achieve financial independence through Equal Means Everything. I stepped to the podium, facing a sea of faces, some friendly, some skeptical, some calculating what their own marriages might be worth. Grace stood in the front row, smiling in a way that finally reached her eyes. When our gazes met, she mouthed one word. Daughter. I gripped the microphone. Financial abuse doesn't always look like control, I began. Sometimes it looks like equality. Sometimes it's disguised as fairness. Sometimes it comes with a spreadsheet and a laminated contract. But abuse is abuse, whether it's calculated in dollars or delivered in bruises. The room was silent. Equal means everything, I continued. Not equal division, but equal worth. Equal respect. Equal partnership. That's what we help women find, not just freedom, but the understanding that they deserve both love and respect, not one at the cost of the other. The applause that followed wasn't polite, it was real. Warm. Human. As I returned to my table, award in hand, I caught my reflection in the ballroom's mirrored wall. The woman staring back wasn't the one who'd once made Aiden's coffee every morning or signed her name beside his with hope instead of caution. She was someone new. Someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't destroying someone else, it's building something better from the ashes they leave behind. My phone buzzed. Another inquiry through my website, another woman ready to rewrite her story. I smiled, thinking of Aiden in some dim apartment, probably eating takeout, finally learning what self-sufficiency really meant. Me? I had something better. Freedom. If this story of calculated revenge kept you hooked till the end, hit that like button now. My favorite part? When Ava charged Grace $12 for tea service, watching her count out the bills, hands trembling but amused. What was yours? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget, subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories of poetic justice and empowerment.